The Stonevault is one of the new dungeons we'll be facing in Season 1 of The War Within. The dungeon starts with a 33-minute timer, so as long as you complete the dungeon within that window, you'll upgrade your key. Upon entering the Stonevault, we have a corridor of mobs to deal with. Cursed Heart invaders cast Arcing Void, dealing moderate damage to a target, which arcs to nearby players within 6 yards. Kick this where possible and loosely spread to avoid the splash damage if the casts do go off. They also have an instant cast Void Infection. This places a nasty shadow dot on a player for 12 seconds. Use curse removal if you have it, or use a defensive. Earth-infused golems deal massive party-wide nature damage with ground pound. Be sure to use personal defensives for this, and be careful pulling too many golems at once, as this could wipe you with a bad overlap. Be sure to also move out of their frontal ability, Seismic Wave, as this will most likely kill you if you're hit. Repurposed loader bots will leap at a player with Pulverizing Pounce. This deals a significant amount of nature damage and knocks back anyone caught. Be sure to move out of these swirlies. The most important kick in this area is Howling Fear, cast by Ghastly Void Souls. Not only does this cast do a decent amount of party-wide damage, it also fears your party for 4 seconds, which will likely end in a wipe. The first boss of the dungeon is E.D.N.A. Volatile spikes will spawn under 3 random players. Players should spread out with these and step out of the swirly to avoid being hit by the spike as it erupts. Once these spikes are spawned, again be sure to avoid running into them, as they'll likely one-shot you, and regardless of how these spikes are destroyed, it will leave a 4-second dot on your party that can stack. The way to destroy these spikes is with the boss's Refracting Beam. This will shoot out fiery energy at each player, dealing moderate damage, but it will also destroy any volatile spikes in its path. Players should try and destroy a few pillars at once, but not all at the same time, as the stacking dot will become overwhelming. The reason we have to use these beams to destroy the pillars is because at 100 energy, the boss will cast Earth Shatterer, dealing heavy group-wide damage, but more importantly, destroying all remaining spikes. If too many spikes are still active, you will wipe. Tanks will need to deal with the boss's Seismic Smash. This deals big physical damage and leaves a seismic reverberation on the tank, dealing heavy ticking nature damage for 30 seconds. Healers can and should dispel this, but upon removal, it will reduce the tank's damage taken by 50% for 6 seconds, so you can actually use this debuff to soak the next tank buster. After defeating E.D.N.A, you can now choose to either head to Skarmorak or Brock and Dorlita. For this guide, I'd recommend heading towards Brock and Dorlita. First though, we have some new trash to deal with. Engine speakers hit the tank with Concussive Smash, dealing a moderate amount of physical damage and slowing them by 20%. However, this isn't the scariest thing for tanks in this area. Aspiring Forge Hands have an instant ability, Fracturing Blows, which increases the tank's damage taken by 5%. This effect stacks and becomes extremely deadly if it does get out of hand. Use AoE stops where possible, use active mitigation if your stacks get high, and kite if needed. The caster mob in this area is the Forgebound Mender. Be sure to use kicks on restoring metals to prevent a 40% heal going out to a nearby mob, and any spare kicks can be used on Alloy Bolt to prevent the random cast of nature damage on a random player. The scariest mob in this area is the Forge Loader. They will use their lava cannon, shooting out a ball of molten lava towards a random player, dealing massive amounts of damage and leaving a nasty dot if struck. Be sure to dodge this at all costs. They also send out a nasty dot, Molten Mortar, which can be lethal. Keep an eye out for this and use personal cooldowns if targeted. Now we're ready to face the second boss of the dungeon. This is a 2-target fight, but the bosses must die at the same time, or you will trigger Silent Speaker. This causes the living boss to pulse tremendous amounts of fire damage and also increase their damage dealt by 25%. This will result in a wipe, so be sure to split your damage on both bosses. Be sure to kick Brock's Molten Metal cast every single time to prevent a nasty fire dot going out, which also slows your party by 50%. This deals a decent amount of damage, and the slow can get people killed by other mechanics. Throughout the fight, Brock will leap away to cast Scrap Song, creating a giant metal cube that they hurl through the boss arena, dealing a massive amount of physical damage and stunning anyone caught. Position towards the edge of the arena during this cast. Directly after this, Molten Metal will be cast again, so be sure to save a ranged kick. Brock will also channel Exhaust Vents, dealing significant party-wide damage. Use personal defensives and healer cooldowns here if needed, but this cast will also activate 3 of the 4 vents in the room, dealing fatal damage to anybody caught by the blast and spitting out pools of lava around them. I'd recommend positioning the bosses on the vent that isn't active to avoid these puddles. Dorlita will hit tanks with a pretty nasty tank buster, Igneous Hammer. Use mitigation on as many of these as possible. They will also cast Lava Cannon, again sending out a giant orb of lava that deals significant upfront damage and leaves a nasty dot, so be sure to sidestep this. Dorlita will eventually jump to the center of the arena, pulling in the scrap cube that Brock created earlier with Blazing Crescendo. As the cube explodes, it will deal huge party-wide damage and also inflict Blazing Shrapnel, dealing further damage over time. Healers should aim to have people topped up before this cast and use healing cooldowns here. The cube's detonation will also send out magma waves that must be dodged. which is why positioning on the vents is useful as the waves don't cross them. Make sure that you're on the inactive vents though. Now the boss is defeated, we can head back towards Skarmorak. Don't worry though, you don't have to run all the way back, as you can use this minecart to travel back to the first part of the dungeon. At the entrance of the next wing, you'll encounter a void-bound despoiler. Use defensive cooldowns during void outbursts, as the unleashed void energy deals significant party-wide damage over the duration. Tanks should also be aware of their Shadow Claw tank buster and use mitigation. Next we have turn speakers. Their censoring gear cast is a priority kick, as it silences a random player for 3 seconds. This can prove fatal if it lands on your healer or even your tank in some scenarios. Another scary kick to look out for here comes from the void-bound howlers. Their piercing whale cast deals moderate damage, but leaves a debuff, increasing your damage taken from the next whale by 25%. This can quickly get out of hand with stacks, so be sure to kick this when you can. Void-touched elementals will expel shards of crystals with crystal salvo, inflicting massive amounts of damage to anyone caught in the swirlies. Be sure to move out of these. Skarmorak is the third boss of the dungeon. The boss will start with a crystalline smash on your tank, inflicting a decent amount of physical damage and spawning 3 crystal shard adds. Tank should use mitigation before this cast goes off. Adds are a priority on this fight, as they will buff a boss ability that we'll discuss later, but be careful killing the shards too quickly, as they apply crystalline eruption when they die, which deals a decent amount of party-wide damage, which stacks. Simply wait a few seconds between killing each add to wait for the debuff to fall off. The main mechanic of this fight is Fortified Shell. At 100 energy, Skarmorak gains an absorb shield and channels void discharge until that shield is broken. This cast deals significant stacking party-wide damage, so healing cooldown should be used, and the shield is also larger based on how many adds are up, which is why they're a priority. In order to deal with the shield more efficiently, you should pick up unstable fragments, and these are spawned from the boss's unstable crash cast. Skarmorak will smash the ground in a 15-yard radius, so be sure to move out of melee and collect 2 to 3 unstable fragments per player, as while this does increase the damage you do to his shield during Fortified Shell, it does also place a stacking shadow dot on you, so try not to take too many stacks. Upon killing Skarmorak, once again, take the minecart shown here to travel back to the start of the dungeon so that we can make our way towards the final boss. In the final corridor, we have some new mobs to deal with. Cursed Forge Honor Guards have a shield stampede charge. Be sure to move out of this, as it will deal a lot of damage and stun you for 2 seconds. The arrow indicator does show at their feet, but it can be quite hard to see under other mechanics, so be very wary. They also hit the tank with Stonebreaker Strike. This deals quite a lot of physical damage, so use mitigation accordingly. Rock Smashers cast Granite Eruption, spawning swirlies that need to be avoided as they deal significant damage. They also have a Smash Rock cast, which works similarly to Piercing Whale that we saw earlier, but cannot be interrupted. This knocks back players within 60 yards and increases the damage you take from the next Rock Smash by 10%. Keep an eye on your stacks and use defensive cooldowns when needed. I'd also recommend not pulling too many Rock Smashers at a time, as this debuff will become fatal after a few stacks. This does also mean that it's worth waiting for the debuff to drop off between pulls. Finally, Cursed Forge Stone Shapers will summon an Earth Burst totem, which probably will kill your group after 7 seconds. You must swap to this totem and nuke it down to prevent wipes. They also have a kick in Stonevault, which can get your tank killed as it chain casts, so use any kicks that you have here. The final boss of the dungeon is High Speaker Eirich. Avoid his frontal Unbridled Void, as this will most likely kill you, and throughout the fight he'll cast Void Corruption, which leaves a permanent dot on you, dealing shadow damage every 3 seconds, which increases in damage by 25% every 3 seconds until it's removed. In order to remove the debuff, position yourself next to the Void Rifts which are spread around the edges of the room. However, make sure to stay away from the Void Rifts when you don't have the debuff, as you'll be sucked into the Void and die. Use defensive cooldowns during the Entropic Reckoning, as all players will be hit with Void Energy, dealing significant damage and leaving a zone of entropy on the floor. Try and place these pulls at the edge of the boss arena, as they last for 1.5 minutes, so you'll eventually run out of space if not placed carefully. But that's it for this boss, and that wraps up the Stonevault for Mythic Plus in Season 1. If you're interested in my nameplates, they are from my free Play to Profile, which can be found inside my Discord. The link will be in the description. And if this guide did help you or a friend out, then please feel free to drop a like down below, subscribe to your boy, and until next time, I'll catch you guys later.